they were surprised that Vilcabamba was a lot bigger than they expected. Bigger. I would say Ecuador is losing that to some degree.
Yeah. But there is a dramatic difference in the weather patterns.
It took me not living in the U.S. to appreciate U.S. culture.
The kids aren't learning how to think.
Right.
They're not learning critical thought.
Regurgitating.
Right.
Culturally here, you can't get pissed off.
I think what gets people here is that it's such a deeper, it's not a superficial thing.
Lojanos come in on the weekends. They're different people than the locals that live here. Foreigners obviously are different people.
I want to move to a warmer climate, to be more comfortable.
They're on sort of the self-exploration path. Hey, I'm gonna leave this place and move to a place where I... Hello and welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. Jesse, Brandon.
What's up, guys?
No Meathead Carl. Bull Moose. What do you call him? Bull Moose?
Shoot, we haven't called him that
Horse
time.
Bull
Horse.
Bull Horse.
The Bull Horse.
I went the Spanish version where you flip the order.
Yeah.
Is on vacation, enjoying the beach, hopefully.
We miss you, Carlitos, already.
Not that much. No, absolutely. I'm sure Carl will see this because he watches our content. I don't watch our content. I believe Carl does watch our content as the chief content officer, which is good. And he may see this. And all jokes aside, have a great vacation, my friend. Enjoy the beach, enjoy the seafood, enjoy the time with family, and we'll see you back here soon. Guys, right now, take a moment, hit the bell, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed to already. But wait, actually do it for real right now. Hit the bell, like button, subscribe to the channel. April 12th. Really, it's the 13th that it actually starts, but April 12th would be a good arrival day. Mm-hmm. Our next Vilcabamba Lifestyle retreat, I think we got about 8 or 10 folks signed up right now. So it's looking like a good group. It's a great size, somewhere in that sort of 8 to 15, 8 to 12 range is an awesome size. Keeps it small and sort of familial, so to speak.
Yeah, we try and keep it under 15. 14 is like a great size, and there's many reasons for that. In transportation, restaurant service, and then just one-on-one time that we can dedicate to folks. It's a good number, so we cap it there.
So we still got a few spots there. Link in the description below if you want to check that out. If you have questions, retreats@abecuador.com, and we can answer any questions you have. All right. Well, what are we talking about today? Brandon said we're going to talk about vortexes, Donald Trump, and what was it?
Gene Keys. Yeah.
So here we go. No, we're going to talk a little bit about. We might hit on those things. Who knows? But we're going to talk a little bit about sort of Vilcabamba and kind of what this place is and what it's becoming and kind of what it's been, and maybe do a little bit of history. I actually had a funny. I was talking to a couple of people that stopped me outside the chocolate shop next to our office. Nice folks who have been sort of exploring the world for the past, I want to say 9 months or something like that. They kind of like sold whatever, uprooted and sold. And I think they may have bought a camper. Awesome. And then they're checking out Costa Rica and they're checking out Ecuador and some other places. And they just wanted to introduce themselves and said that they'd been watching and thanks for the content and stuff. But I think it was them. I think it was the guy. But somebody recently was telling me they were surprised that Vilcabamba was a lot bigger than they expected. Bigger.
It's always the opposite.
From the videos.
Most people always expect that it's smaller. Most people I meet, they think that when they get here, they see the videos, and then they're surprised how much smaller Vilcabamba is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like almost every person that I've met that has mentioned that that's been a topic, it's always been the opposite. So that's the first one I've heard that. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten a lot of feedback like one way or the other on that. It's all relative, right? It's all like perspective and what you expect coming in because, even when I got to Ecuador, 11 years ago, like this was a significantly smaller town than it is now. And if you go back like 11 years prior to that, it was probably 30% of the size it is now. And then you go back like 10 years before that and it's like a few people.
Right. Well, right. I mean, even you can see some of the photos from early Vilcabamba or some of the stories like Peter from Ishkailum or Dennis from the juice factory that they've been here since the 70s. And you see hear their stories describing the town. It's like, it's nowhere near. It's like standard deviation difference, multiple differences from that time to now. So,
no, I mean, when I was here, early on, and like they put in a stoplight. This was a big event, in the town. Yeah. Totally unnecessary stoplight, probably still, although it really was ridiculous when they put it in. Now, especially on the weekends, there's some traffic-ish.
I mean, at least on the weekends, it's generally obeyed. During the week, it's just kind of like...
I know, they should leave it off.
Decoration.
No, I found out, too, a funny thing. So apparently, they have some kind of classification for government funds in towns, and a threshold is a stoplight. So you have towns, like there's one, I think is it Valladolid? There's like 8 people in the town. I'm exaggerating. Carl, I'm exaggerating. But there's a stoplight, as you roll through. There's not a paved road in the town. There's like 4 cars and 6 donkeys. But there's a stop. So I think some of that was just to get access to some federal funds.
Yeah, and maybe back then. But you're right. On the weekends, for sure, the stoplight is beneficial.
But Vilcabamba is growing and will continue to grow and has grown a lot. I mean, basically, as sort of, things developed in Ecuador. And I can't talk well about Ecuador prior to 2013. So I tread lightly on that history because, I just don't know it that well. Like the history that I know, I learn along with the people watching on some of these interviews where I get a chance to ask, hey, what was the 70s like? What was the 80s like? What was the 90s like? What was the, when all the revolutions and the currency collapse and Correa come into power and, what was all that stuff like? And, most people tend to have a relatively similar perspective on that. So I have a little bit of an idea, but it's hard to, if you weren't here, it's hard to really talk about any of that well. So, I don't know exactly when Lojanos, people from Loja, from the city, decided Malacatos Vilcabamba is the second home destination. That's the place to build the Casa de Campo, the second, the second home, the weekend house, the vacation home. Because, prior to me getting here at some point, not that long in the past, Malacatos was essentially 100% sugarcane. Vilcabamba, at least down in the valley, had been sugarcane going back probably a little further. And Vilcabamba, not that long before I got here either, was still pretty much an agricultural valley. And then at some point, the process was already well underway when I got here, well underway. These two valleys became highly sought after by folks from Loja for residential use. And so, I think part of that probably coincided with during Correa's time, and he came to power. Let's see, he was there till 2016. So 2006 he came to power. During Correa's time, they really did build up the infrastructure in the country. They made the roads really good. So I think travel between, Loja, Malacatos, Loja, Vilcabamba became paved and smooth and easy.
Well, that matters.
That matters. And so people started, building second homes.
And that kind of happens in other places. That happens in anywhere in the world, really. You have people that migrate from cities further out as the infrastructure develops. Most of the places that we're familiar with, the infrastructure has been, in existence for a long time. So it's not this is, 50 years ago, when, the car, my son's watching the Cars movie recently. He hurt his ankle, so he hasn't been able to play soccer. So he's a little bummed and he's watching the Cars movie. And there's, in the first one, there's this little town, this Radiator Springs that's off of the interstate. And then Route 66, the famous Route 66, and it's this, bustling little cultural-filled town. And then as they put the interstate in and bypass Route 66, the town slowly dies, right? But the infrastructure is there, so it allows people to get further out faster. And so that's happened here, right? Because there's one main thoroughway, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the interstate they brought in versus, the side roads or the horse trails. I don't even know how else would you get here, right? Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember. So when I was coming to Ecuador in 2013, I remember talking to an attorney of mine in New York, and he was all excited. We were kind of friends, we'd become kind of friends, and he was all excited for my trip, and he was telling me, "Oh, I love Ecuador. I was there, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years earlier. So let's say early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s." And he's telling me that he was driving from Cuenca to Loja. I believe it was Cuenca to Loja. And there was, a guy carrying a shotgun and a flashlight walking, because there was heavy fog at night, walking in front of the car on a dirt road, like making sure they don't drive off a cliff, basically. Wow. This was 25 years ago. Wow. It wasn't that long ago that this was a very different place. And I think actually, that some of that history is why people like you and I love this place so much, because the culture, the society still has a lot of remnants of when it was just this very homogeneous, fully intact, not very mobile, because of that lack of infrastructure, and because people not that long ago were still living and even now in many ways, we're still living a very traditional, lifestyle where multiple generations in the same place, and a lot of their lives agriculturally based, and communities that have ties going back many, many, many generations, and all that kind of stuff. It creates this sort of close-knit, respectful, just sort of upstanding, healthy, culture and society. And I would say Ecuador is losing that to some degree. And, especially if you talk to people who go back further, they'll agree they'll say that that's diminishing. And even in my time here, I've seen, TV comes in, and you start to get those influences, and then you get the airports, and people start to get the idea in their head of the kids want to move to the cities and work or go overseas, and it's, you start to lose a little bit of that kind of that special sort of bond that creates amazing societies and cultures. But compared to the places we come from, it's still night and day different in terms of how much more that way it is.
Yeah. And here it's all of that is conducive for an empathetic community, right? It's really family oriented. It's not just family in your nuclear family, but family throughout the community. This past Friday, we got invited over to our Ecuadorian friend's house, and the mom's cooking dinner, and there's all these other people that are coming by, and they're it's this thing they do on Friday nights, and but it's hey, they bring out chairs, sit down, here you go, but it's not like we were outsiders anymore. It was you're here now, you're part of this, and it almost felt normal. I wish I could communicate a little better, or a lot better.
You'll get there.
But it was still they were fine with it. They were fine with using Translate sometimes and then working on it together. But it was awesome. And it was from kids to middle-aged to people our age to elders. And they were all just laughing and having fun and hanging out and sharing meals and telling stories. And I mean, of course that stuff happens where we're from.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I can use words to make it sound different, because it feels different here than doing something like that in the States.
Yeah, there's a different quality to it. There's just something about the way people care for one another here, and the way families are bonded, and friends too are just sort of bonded. It's I don't know. It's it's just very human. The person comes first, life comes first. It's not, your responsibilities and the money doesn't come first. It just doesn't. It's the other stuff that comes first. That stuff comes later. And it's it's very communal, it's which took some adjusting for me too, sort of the mindset, because the US mindset is very individualistic, right? It's very, all of our US ethoses, they're real, to whatever degree, people abide by them or believe in them, that's another conversation. But when you compare it to a place like Latin America, you realize, oh, all those slogans and like stuff that we grew up hearing about, people really believe it and do live by it to a much larger degree than they would here. You know, the whole sort of like individualistic, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, your word is your bond, you know, you're responsible for everything in your life. And, you know, kids are like at 18, it's like, you know, go make your way in the world. And you know, these ideas around freedom and the ideas around individual rights and all this kind of stuff, which a lot of that stuff is great. Like a lot of that stuff is, you know, I really appreciate. It took me not living in the U.S. to appreciate U.S. culture, which is kind of funny because there's something great about the U.S. culture also, but in a totally different way.
Right.
Which maybe that's for another show, but yeah, but you know, they don't have any of those ethoses here. Right. None of them. Like any of those ones I just mentioned, those don't exist here. Here, you know, I don't even know what the ethoses would be, but it would be more like, you know, we care about the environment, we care about our family, we care about each other. You know, we want everybody like happy and healthy and like, you know, it's like stuff like that.
Yeah. No, and that's interesting what you said about the United States culture, because that's true. That's definitely true for me too. Is, you know, when you're there, it's easy, especially if you're there and you get into if you get sucked into the divisiveness and the politics and you in the you know, what's the word, the nastiness on social media and Facebook and that stuff, if you get sucked into that, it's really easy to get jaded and hate culture, hate the culture you're in, hate the culture you're from, and it's kind of, the grass is always greener, right? It's always like, well, it's way better over there. And it's anywhere you go, there's going to be, you know, pluses and minuses to the culture. But I definitely agree that until I came here, like I was much more jaded on the U.S. culture before I left. And now being here now almost 3 years, there are many things that I still value about the culture there and that are important. Not necessarily that I want to bring here in any way, but that I still, that's weird to say it like that.
Totally. I feel the same way though.
But I still value them for whatever that's worth. The other thing that I thought was interesting you said was that with the culture here and as things are changing and you're seeing, you know, younger people wanting to live in the cities or go to college or go overseas or go to the States, and you're seeing more and more people with cell phones, like almost every Ecuadorian I know has a smartphone. There's still plenty, probably more that don't here than the United States, but most of them do. That was another interesting thing about the other night, that Friday night we went, and almost all those people that were there have cell phones, I know for sure. And we were sitting around for 2 hours plus. Nobody had the only time we had cell phones out was to use Google Translate. Nobody was on their cell phone. Nobody was like in their own world. Everybody was like present, eye contact, conversing, not in their phones. And that was like really, really refreshing. Yeah. Because that's not the case in the States, man.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, really. Yeah. I mean, I know you probably feel the same way with me, but like, you know, I have to fight with you and Carl to like put your phones down so I can have your attention. You know,
somebody's got to do the work, Jesse.
But I know, but it's just like indicative of, you know, it's like it's so easy to just sit there.
Oh yeah,
glued with, you know, sort of in two worlds. It's like, sure, you're kind of paying attention to whatever's going on, but in between paying attention, you're like on
dopamine.
Yeah, which is awful. Like I try so hard not to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. Let's see. There was something I was thinking of.
While you're thinking of that, I think one of the other, you know, again, I'm totally speculating because I didn't make the move from Loja as a local from Loja to make my second home in Vilcabamba in Malacatos. But there is a dramatic difference in the weather pattern. So I don't know if that's something to do with it.
That's a huge piece.
That it's much warmer, it's much sunnier.
That's the main reason. You know, so Loja is 6,500 feet in the sort of the basin of the valley. you can live in the higher up, way higher up, but it's about 6,500 feet. Vilcabamba in town is 5,000. So it's a 15, and Malacatos is probably 4,800 or something like that. It's almost the same. So as you drop down out of the mountains from Loja towards, Rumishitana and then Malacatos Valley, Taxiche, and Landangi, as you get down in elevation, it warms up, precipitously. So you can have, Loja gets all the mountain cities in Ecuador, all of them are like this, but Loja gets a decent amount of rain. And the weather patterns there are unpredictable. You can have the clouds will roll through, and all of a sudden it feels, especially if it's raining, it feels freezing.
Yeah.
And then the sun comes out and it's beautiful and hot, and not like hot, but like hot. Hot enough, definitely, like upper 70s, low 80s with a lot of sun.
And that can happen in the same day.
It could happen 5 times in the same day.
Yeah.
Literally.
Right.
And then you can have stretches in Loja where the weather is mostly fantastic, and you can have stretches where it's kind of raining and cold for a decent amount of the time. So people get out of the city and come to the warmer, little bit more countryside areas, similar to any city in the world.
But the weather typically doesn't change.
The weather usually doesn't
dramatically, with an hour from Chicago.
Right.
An hour and a half, an hour from Nashville, hour from LA, you're not getting those big weather changes, hour from Denver.
Right.
But here, because of the elevation changes, you're getting more. Maybe in California, you can get some of that in some of the mountain, or even in Denver, maybe you can get some of that. But generally speaking, you don't get a bunch of that.
But, one of the things I was thinking of earlier while you were talking, that for me is just a joy, makes living, one of the things that makes living here a joy for me is that, back home in general, there's some wiggle room on some things here and there, but in general, people really abide by rules, whatever those rules are, right? So if you're dealing with, let's just use an example of like a restaurant or a hotel. Right. So if you're dealing with a hotel, the hotel has policies. Whatever those policies are, they're going to be enforced like 90+% of the time. And, let's say you need a late checkout or something. Yeah. Well, the hotel's going to have a policy. Yeah. Okay, well, checkouts at this time. Maybe they have some way where you could pay and check out a couple hours later or something. Maybe they have some late checkout thing. I don't even know if that exists in the States or not. Yeah. But maybe they have something like that. But whatever it is, it's going to go by the policy. Same with a restaurant. Let's say, a restaurant, they have a takeout policy. They have a kitchen gets closed at this time policy. They have a how many, kids menu policy. They have like a dress code perhaps. They have a policy on all kinds of stuff. And again, whatever that is going to be pretty much abided by. You might be able to talk your way in and out of something here and there in some unique circumstances, especially if you have the personality and, you can do that, but it's pretty minimal. Right. And in Ecuador, that's just the opposite. Like literally it's the opposite, right? And there might be a policy occasionally, on some things, for the most part, not at all. But even if there is, no, they don't even know what it is. No one's cares about that. Right. You're just going to ask, and whatever you're trying to get them to do, or you're trying to do, you're going to ask a person and they're going to answer based on if it works or not. Like, is it cool? Hey, so, I mean, I don't think I've probably stayed at hotels in Ecuador and checked out basically whenever I wanted, 50 times. I've never one time had a no. It been no, once, not once, hey, I wanted to ask you guys, I have my flight is not till 7 p.m. I know, can I stay until 5 p.m. or 4 p.m.? And once in a while they have to check and just make sure that they have enough rooms where they, the answer's been yes every single time. Right. There's no takeout policy in any restaurant. There's no such thing. You're just going to, you're going to have the personal WhatsApp number of all these people and you're going to text. And because they already know you have the relation. They're going to do whatever you ask pretty much without fail, including even if it means going way out of their way to help you with something. Like that's just
and
the culture.
staying way late. They can have hours that this is when they close, and you can be there 3 hours after that.
Right.
And I mean, not like disrespectfully, but because they're fine with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, hang out, keep hanging out, have some more food, bring out appetizers, bring out some drinks. Like they're good with that most of the time.
Yeah, and that's just indicative of just the attitude of the people, which again is something I really appreciate.
Yeah.
Now, like there might be people who really like, rules are rules, and they really like order, because there's some downsides to that, right? Like the downsides is they're gonna screw up your takeout order 90% of the time.
Right.
Like you think you're getting, forks and napkins without asking? No.
Right.
You're like, do the takeout containers make any sense?
Nope.
No, not at all. Could it take like way longer than you expected? Are things way less organized? All that kind of stuff. 100%.
Yep.
Like 100%. You're dealing with all that. And so it forces you to be more human also.
Right.
In that process, because now you can't get pissed off.
Right.
Culturally here, you can't get pissed off. So you can't get mad because they screwed up your order, or because, they didn't put the fork in and you have nothing to eat it with, or because, it took 45 minutes longer than they told you, or, you have to like literally have those human interactions around all this stuff.
Right.
So, with a smile, like, hey, like, you have napkins? Is there, you have utensils? Is there napkins? All the stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. In the rural areas too, in the small towns, the margins on restaurants are so thin that you can't even have the expectation if it's screwed up. I want you to take, give me something else instead. You screwed this up. This is not right. Throw it away and make me something else. Like there's no margin for that. Like if it's screwed up, you have to be like, if you want something else, you either eat it or you pay for something else, kind of, and you can't expect them to just, eat the mistake here, which is going to piss a lot of people off.
Yeah, absolutely. and you mean, you find hairs in your food occasionally, like it's not,
Right. That's an interesting one, right? It's kind of, it's kind of gross, right? To find hair in your food, it's kind of gross.
Yeah.
But you're eating muscle and tendon, and if you're eating meat, like, is it really that gross? I don't know.
So like, I'm a little bit, if I go to the bathroom, like I take a shower after, like I'm like that guy, right? I really like cleanliness.
Oh yeah.
I really like sort of, all that stuff. And so this was an adjustment for me in Ecuador, like the Ecuadorian, sort of bathrooms and kitchens and restaurants.
Well, you probably didn't use the bathrooms in restaurants for a while.
No, I still don't.
You still don't.
but I didn't really back home either. But the go-to
There's
move,
some nice ones.
The go-to move is a hotel if you need to. Hotels are, but yeah, I mean that was an adjustment. So like I went from there's a hair in my food. Like not only will I not take another bite,
right,
but I want to I'm repulsed. It's like now I just pull it out and keep eating.
Right. Not only are you repulsed, but you're throwing, you're bringing the manager over and you want the bill taken care of.
I don't even say a word.
Right.
Not a word.
Right.
Like I just there's hair.
Yeah. That's. Come on down to Vilcabamba, everybody.
Yeah, but I mean, it is different, right?
No,
like these things are.
I mean, the thing is, you find that anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it there. I wouldn't say like I've noticed hairs in my food way.
But you can't see.
Do I always wear these?
Sometimes.
Oh, don't I always wear these? No, but it's. I don't think there's like oh my God, there's way more. This is crazy. This is what we're talking about. There's way more hairs in my. I don't see that.
Right, but it's like a lot of those things, right? It really depends on what you're looking for. Like I'm somebody who spent my life rebelling against rules and authority, and like I don't like any of that stuff.
Right.
Never did, and never
Right.
will. It's like in my nature to be as free as possible and to have as little restriction on my life as possible. So this place works really well for me because it's like I can just have human interactions with everybody, and the yes or no is based on that, not anything else.
Right.
Yes, this is good,
That's awesome.
And I'm very happy to live with the quote unquote downsides of that, like some of the stuff we just talked about, because it's not a big deal. In fact, it teaches me how to be in control of my emotions, be in control of my thoughts, be in control of basically not to be a dick.
Right.
When something doesn't go your way. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but again, that's because that's how I'm wired. So the people who were the kids in school, I'm just using this as an example, the kids in school who are all about the rules and all about doing what the teacher says. As adults, they would hate it here.
I was that kid.
Were you?
Yeah, I was a rule follower. Yeah, teacher's pet kind of, growing up. That was, I didn't break the rules. I didn't get in trouble. I did what I was told, Yeah, so I don't know, so maybe, but people can change too.
Right. I just mean if they carry that into...
Oh, sure. Yeah.
If people are just oriented around, these are the policies, these are the rules, you need, law and order, you need rules.
These are the protection, this is why I feel safe, because all these regulations are in place.
Exactly.
This is why and it kind of, in a way, it almost makes, that's part of probably why you're seeing a decline in critical thought in the United States, because some of these things foster, almost like a sloth brain mentality where people get to be lazy thinkers in a way because there's so many regulations and precautions and, rules, and that it gives them almost a false sense of safety, but it's like a fake confidence in living. But it really slows down their ability, or it kind of removes their motivation to critically think about things and make their own decisions versus, now they have to be told, they need, I have friends that, some of them they need to watch CNN, or they need to watch, they need to read The Atlantic, or they need to watch, so these are some of my hardcore liberal friends. They need to watch those media sources that cater to that before they share an opinion on something. Right. It's almost gotten to that point where they're not stupid. They're very smart people, but somehow they've evolved into this position where they don't really know what to think, or they're not confident enough to say, to critically think about some mainstream news story and give an opinion until they hear their talking heads talk about it first. And it's on both sides.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. You're seeing that, and then you look at the education system, and you see, I have friends. All my friends' kids are in the school system in the United States. Some of them are in private, some of them are in public, and I get generally some of the same concerns that the kids aren't learning how to think.
Right.
They're not learning critical thought.
Regurgitating.
Right. And it's maybe always been some of that, right? I mean, even when we were in school back in the day, it's a lot of memorization. It's a lot of, that type of conditioning. But it seems like there's less and less, critical thought that's being learned. Kids aren't learning how to learn.
That's a good transition sort of into some of the Vilcabamba stuff, because, what percentage of the expats in Vilcabamba are not critical thinkers? Very few, right? Like folks that are plugged into narratives in the media, whether that's the CNN narrative or the Fox News narrative or whatever, folks who are sort of tuned into a narrative and allows the narrative to kind of do their thinking for them. You're not going to find many of those people, in Vilcabamba.
Right.
One of the sort of themes that runs through this community is people have decided to uproot themselves in their lives and change locations specifically to this valley in most cases for some very kind of deep and unique and sincere reasons that tend to be, hey, the prevailing narrative where I live doesn't fit me anymore, and it's not what I want in my life, and I want something different. And it takes some fortitude, it takes some guts,
faith.
faith, right? To to say, in my case, New York, in your case, Chicago, and in a million other people's here in different places, like, hey, I'm going to leave this place and move to a place where I don't speak the language, I don't really know what's going on, is totally unknown to me, essentially. Maybe I visited, but
different freaking continent.
Right. Continent. And so people, you kind of have to have a compelling reason, to do that. And, different expats, I think, are drawn to different places, both in Ecuador and in the world, for different reasons. Mm-hmm. But like in this particular community, it tends to be people who are free thinkers, who are looking for a degree of freedom in their life, who tend to be interested in community, in health, in sort of some nice lifestyle stuff. There's a lot of homeschoolers here. Yeah. There's a lot of people who value nature and growing food and, obviously the climate, and there's a lot of other benefits, but that tends to be kind of what this community consists of, at least in terms of the expats. Now, for locals, I would say this town is more or less like any other sort of small town in Ecuador. The only difference is, for a town this size, the economy is much more robust because you do have so many foreigners here who support the local businesses and support the taxis and support the all the stuff here, in addition to massive influxes of Lojanos who spend a lot of money on the weekends. So it's a little bit of sort of a tourist town in that way.
Right.
Plus the expats, plus obviously the locals who have been here forever. One of the other interesting things about this town is there's no animosity between any of those groups. It's like Lojanos come in on the weekends. They're different people than the locals that live here. Foreigners obviously are different people than both of those groups. And there's no resentment. There's no animosity. Like there's none of that. There's none of that at all.
No, they're all hanging out on the town square. If there's a band in town on the corner, it's Lojanos and locals and gringos, and they're all hanging out, listening to the same music, talking in the same groups. Like, that's normal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's like, what do you think it is that, draws all these people to this valley?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, as you described, what it takes, the thought process on what it takes for folks to leave a country they're from, a place they're born and raised, where they've spent most of their lives, to kind of pick up and move seeking something different. Something is drastically different with so many unknowns as a place like Ecuador, because there isn't a lot of information online. There isn't a lot of, it's really hard to get an accurate understanding of what life in Ecuador is like without being here. It's, we do our best to try and show some of that in our videos, but it's still, until you're here, it's hard to really understand what it's like. So for people to kind of inherently know that, and then understand how all the unknowns and how difficult it really is to make that, to even say, yes, I'm going to do that, let alone the fortitude it takes to actually execute it and make it a reality. That's getting harder and harder as things kind of morph in the world and change. That's getting harder to say yes, and it's getting harder to execute. It's never going to get easier than it is now. But I think what gets people here is that it's such a deeper. It's not a superficial thing. It's not like, hey, I live in Chicago, and this was me at one point. I live in Chicago. Let's look for warmer weather. Like, let's look at Florida. Let's look at California. Like, it was as superficial as the weather only. Not about community. Not about culture. Not about self accountability or sustainability or any of that stuff. It was just the superficial. I want to move to a warmer climate, to be more comfortable. The folks, that's a much easier decision to both say yes to. It's not that it's easy, but it's much easier than, picking up and moving to a different continent. And then to execute something like that is much easier. Here, the faith you need to have and the courage you need to have to do it is, it can't just be superficial. It's much deeper. So all the people that have made the decision and said yes and executed and came here, the reasons, their motivations are much deeper. They're they're much more real. They're way less superficial. They're more, what's the word? What's the opposite of superficial?
Depth.
I mean, yeah, but it doesn't even seem like it does it justice. It's like, it's the motivation to get people to move like that is not, well, I'm really not grabbing the right word, but it's
conviction, maybe
conviction, authenticity. I don't know.
I mean, it has to come from a place of conviction to do it.
Right. And that's kind of the courage and the faith piece. But I just mean that the decision is it's at a much deeper level. It's much more rooted, grounded, it's just about the weather, right? The people that come and visit just for the weather, they usually don't stay, if that's their whole reason. They just happen to randomly, like, we're going to go check out Ecuador because I like the weather. Those people generally don't stick around that I've met. But the people that have stayed in the community or that have been here a while or that come here and spend time and understand it and then decide, yeah, this is where I want my next step, it's always like a deeper, grounded, more rooted reason, not the superficial one. So it's got to be people that are at some different level of, understanding their world or understanding themselves, or I don't even know how to describe it. I just struggled a long way.
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. I mean, I think, the way I would sort of relate to what you said is I think a lot of people just kind of feel called here.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people that live here in one way or the other have been called to be here.
Right.
And feel that. And if you ask them about it, we'll tell you about it. People, it's, and I think maybe that part of that sort of relates to the depth of what it takes to make that decision to not only be here, but then be successful here. It's it does take that conviction, AKA you needed to sort of have a compelling reason and feel called to do so.
Right.
And feel conviction in that to get through the difficulty also, right? Of the transition and the totally different everything. And some people just fall right into it and have a really easy time. But for others, it's easy to just be like, oh my God, nothing here makes any sense. And I can't get anything accomplished. I don't understand the language. And what am my family's not here. And what am I doing?
Yeah. And it sounds a little crazy. People that aren't at the, if you're folks that are on making decisions like I was originally making them, thinking about moving to a warmer climate, if that's the depth of your decision making or where you're at in life at that moment, when you hear somebody say, I felt call, I heard the call, that was me. I had to tell my friends, I've heard calls in my life, but this is the first one I actually listened to, and we're in Ecuador. It sounds insane. It sounds insane. It sounds crazy to those people. And then it's hard because it's hard for folks to understand it, that aren't there, that aren't making decisions that way in their life or don't feel it for whatever reason, for a multitude of reasons. They're not at that spot in their life at that time. Maybe never will. Maybe someday will. Maybe were and came out of it, whatever. But when they're not there while you're there, then that's hard, because if it's people you love and people you're friends with, right, and they don't understand, and then it's hard, and it's not that they're trying to hurt you, but the fact that they have doubts and that fear comes in because it's so unknown and so foreign to them, that they're trying to save you from making a mistake, and they're trying to protect you, and I'm only looking out for you, but it's just this rash and tidal wave of negativity. So when you're going through that psychologically, when you're making that decision the first time, and you commit and you hear the call and you say, yes, we're doing this, we're taking steps, and then you get that first tidal wave of your friends and family, the people you love and spend the most time with, creating this cast of fear and doubt and concern. I mean, that's tough, man, to not just get riptide right back out into the ocean and stuck, it's right. It's really difficult.
Yeah. And it's to me, it's kind of look, life is meant to be lived, mm-hmm. What is that great quote? which I'll butcher completely, but it's something to do with, you never, when you're on your deathbed, you don't regret the, like, having lived, like, the things you've done. Your regrets are the things that you didn't do, right? Yep. And it's like, it's like life is meant to be lived. And I do think there is a barrier there that you just very well described in terms of when you are looking to break free and, like, live and have experiences and follow your heart and follow your calling and have a more authentic life. People try to make you not happen. Like, people try to, not intentionally.
Right. I was going to say, it's not intentional.
No, it's just what you said. They're looking out for you. They think they're looking out for you. But that phenomenon, it's almost kind of the crabs in the bucket, analogy. That really happens. And it's like once, from my perspective, it's like once you take that leap in faith, because it does take a lot of faith, that's where the magic starts.
Oh, yeah.
And it can be hard. It can be rough too. And that's kind of part of, like, life needs to be lived. It includes hardship and pain and difficult times and all that stuff.
Right.
And learning, right, which causes a lot of learning.
Right.
And also the other side, the great triumphs and successes and things that you came out the other side of. And, like, moving to Vilcabamba, Ecuador will precipitate all of those kinds of things. It's like, I don't know, one of the things I just really appreciate, it makes me, all the opportunities I've had to sort of set up camp elsewhere, either on my land in Loja or on the coast. We've talked about doing some stuff, and there's other parts of the country I like, and I'm sure there's other places in the world I'd like. Right. But, like, the thing that has always kept me very, just wanting to be in and around, the Vilcabamba and the people in Vilcabamba consistently is that, the community of people that live here, they're all on, not all, but, like, almost all. I'm talking about the expat, the foreign community, essentially, at this point, but local community also in many cases. But they're on sort of the self-exploration path. They're like, they're looking at themselves and they're questioning, themselves and their reality, and they're looking at their life, and they're interesting people, and they're doing interesting things, and you can have deep, interesting conversations and real relationships and real friendships and, true community, like truly actually caring about one another and being there, but not being there in a fake sort of Hallmark way at all.
Right.
More, it's Hallmark. Like when people ask you in Vilcabamba, like, how are you? They mean it. Yeah. And you can actually, if you want to engage in that and actually be like, well, I'm going through it right now. I'm dealing with, like, that's completely cool here. Like, nobody is going to be like, oh God, this guy's, really, I just want him to say good and move on. Like, you can do that if you want, of course, but it's not like you have to have a deep conversation with every person you run into. But there's a depth to the people here. There's a sort of theme of that, and then there's the healing theme as well. A lot of people are on a healing journey. This valley, it's called the Valley of Longevity. It's got all kinds of myth and legend around healing and properties of healing and longevity, and it's attracted, a plethora. It's probably an understatement of amazing healers from all over the world, which is one of the cool things about this community as well.
Yeah. World renowned, man. Like, you've got some amazing health practitioners, healers of a variety of modalities that are available at an arm's length away. They're here available. You don't have to wait months to see these folks. But you nailed, like, what I took 10 minutes to try to describe deep. But that's it, right? It's the whole reason that it's the folks that are at a deeper level or on a less superficial journey to find themselves or understand the world. Those are the folks that are coming here. And then because they're here, that creates the environment you just described, like where you can have those discussions and people are kind of more or less on that level and understand and are willing and wanting to be part of that and be there. And it's, you know, that's also kind of what I mean, where it's not going to get any easier from here, because if you're from a place like the States or Canada or some places in Europe where you're kind of on that wheel of keeping up with the Joneses and you're, you know, trying to make ends meet and, you know, provide for your family and you're dealing with the inflation and the, you know, the busyness of life there, you know, and then the downtime, the small downtime you do have in that type of lifestyle, you're getting sucked into the hyper divisiveness of global political machinations and local politics in your country. In almost every country, it seems like there's these big divides now. And it seems like the middle is getting further and further separated from the middle and pushed to either side. So that makes it even harder, because as you live in that longer and longer, it's harder to say yes for yourself to make the decision, but then it's harder to execute because, you know, maybe 10 years ago, if you were more in the middle, in the political sphere, you could make a decision that was maybe a little outside of the middle, a little maybe one side or the other, and you wouldn't have these extreme rash, you know, hyperbolic responses to that decision because more people were in the middle. Now, as the middle gets spread out further and further, then the reaction to either decision, you make a decision that is, you know, 180 degrees from the folks on the right believe or the left believe, then your reaction to that decision is just so much more violent in a way, not physically violent, but like a violent opposing reaction. So then that's hard, like mentally to deal with when you make those decisions and then you have these violent reactions, again, not necessarily intentionally trying to inhibit you, trying to protect you, trying to look out for you, but that's tough to navigate, man. It's not going to get easier the more and more people are divided in their social views on things.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, and also like economically, it's not going to get easier.
No.
Legally, it's not going to get easier.
Right.
You know, so on and so forth. We've seen maybe some previews of that a little bit over the last few years. But all right, I got to wrap. I got to be somewhere in 7 minutes to interview Arabella.
All right.
That will be released the Sunday following, not the next day, the next week, Sunday, following the release of this podcast on Saturday.
Yeah.
So check that out. That's going to be a fun interview.
Yeah, she's cool.
She's cool. She's got a beautiful Airbnb spot here in Vilcabamba.
She's got a super interesting story.
Yeah. I don't know it at all, so I'm going to be
Yeah.
learning it during the interview.
Yeah, cool.
So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Again, hit the like button if you enjoy this content. Subscribe to the channel for just about daily content. I think 5 days a week now we're putting stuff out. Let's see. Did I say everything I was supposed to say?
I think so. So we hope to see you down here one day, guys.
And until then,
we'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.
Ciao, guys.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel right here. Check out our real estate channel right here for content that you will absolutely love. Click right here. And if you want to know how we got here, click here.